Adolis Garcia is one of the most exciting players in all of baseball.
And this ball hammered deep to center field, and it's gone!
In the span of a single year, he became a superstar for the Rangers and led them to their first championship in history.
Hammers it to left field, and the legend grows!
During his rise to fame, he's been called a villain and even accused by fans of being on steroids. However, just a few years ago, he was pretty much unknown and on the verge of being released by the Rangers. So to really understand his story, we have to go back to where it all started in the first place. He was born in Cuba in 1993, surrounded by baseball his entire childhood. And when he was 18 years old, Garcia made his professional debut, playing for his hometown team. Over the next few years, he developed into one of the best prospects in the country, and even led his team to a championship. So by that point, he made it known that he wanted to play in MLB, but unfortunately, this dream was much further away than he thought it was. For players in Cuba, going straight to America is illegal, but luckily for Garcia, he found a different way. In 2016, he was able to sign with a team in Japan, under the condition that a majority of his salary went back to the Cuban government, which at the time didn't really matter, as it was all part of a much bigger plan. After that season was over, Garcia was supposed to return to Cuba, but instead, he took a flight to an entirely different country. In doing so, he had officially made it out of Cuba, which meant that he finally had the freedom to play in MLB. And sure enough, he ended up signing with the Cardinals for $2.5 million. Now, as you can imagine, he had been waiting for this moment his entire life, saying that I was determined to do what I wanted to do. However, his journey would not get any easier going forward. In 2017, he played in both AA and AAA, putting up solid numbers on both sides of the field. One scout said that when he's dialed in, he's capable of hitting balls over the fence with basically one hand. Not to mention, he also had one of the strongest arms in the entire league. So at 24 years old, he was finally starting to get some recognition. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, there's more just like this one coming soon. So make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out. In 2018, Garcia started the season back in AAA and once again put up solid numbers. So during that same year, the Cardinals finally decided it was time to give him a chance. On August 8th, Garcia made his MLB debut, going 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. However, his time in the majors was very short-lived, as next season he would once again spend the entire year in the minors. And despite hitting 32 home runs that season, the Cardinals traded Garcia to the Rangers in December of 2019. Throughout 2020, he only played in 3 games total, and was almost released by the Rangers. At this point, he was already 28 years old, so time was running out. However, Garcia continued to stay confident, saying that I knew this team was going to give me the opportunity, I just needed to take advantage of it. And sure enough, that's exactly what ended up happening. On April 13th of 2021, Garcia was called up by the Rangers, and he wasted no time making a name for himself. One of his best highlights came only 2 days later, when he won a game for the Rangers with his very first home run. Throughout the season, Garcia hit 31 home runs with 90 RBIs, and also showed off some incredible defense in the outfield. Next season, he had a very similar year when it comes to performance, but some people were still not convinced that he was anything more than just average. One sports writer said, "Let's be honest, as fun as he is to watch, he's not a star, at least in the hitting metrics," which was not entirely wrong. In both of his first 2 years, Garcia's offense was not very consistent, and his OPS was only around 750. So even though he hit a lot of home runs, he was still known as an all-or-nothing hitter. In fact, when it came to striking out and chasing pitches, Garcia ranked among the worst in all of baseball. So going into his 3rd year, he knew that he still had a lot to work on if he wanted to be taken seriously. Over the offseason, Garcia worked with his hitting coach to be more patient and force pitchers to throw in the zone. And at the beginning of the 2023 season, he looked like an entirely different hitter at the plate. His chase rate suddenly dropped by almost 10%, primarily due to a massive improvement in his approach towards breaking balls. As a result, his walk rate pretty much doubled overnight, and suddenly, Garcia was much more than an all-or-nothing hitter. But of course, he was still hitting for just as much power. On April 22nd, Garcia had one of the best games of his career, going 5 for 5 with 2 doubles and 3 home runs, becoming just the 4th player in history to do so. Over the course of the season, he was one of the best right fielders in all of baseball. For the 2nd time in his career, he was selected to be an All-Star, and even won the Gold Glove for right field. So in just 1 year, Garcia had become an entirely different player compared to years past. However, his season wasn't over quite yet, and his rise to fame had only just begun. After he was traded to the Rangers in 2021, they ended up having their worst season in franchise history, losing 102 games. But just 2 years later, they were suddenly in the playoffs for the first time since 2016. Now, this transformation was a result of several major signings, as well as many prospects they developed over the years. But what they didn't know is that a player they acquired for basically nothing was about to lead them to their first championship in history. The Rangers postseason started off extremely well, with Garcia hitting his first postseason home run on the way to a 2-game sweep of the Rays. Next up was the Orioles, and throughout the series, Garcia went 5 for 14 with a massive home run in Game 3 that pretty much sealed another sweep. But now, the Rangers would shift their focus towards the reigning world champions and their biggest rival, the Astros. The first 2 games of the series went to the Rangers, despite Garcia being held to just 1 hit in 7 at-bats. However, their winning streak finally came to an end after dropping games 3 and 4 at home. So with the series tied at 2, it felt like the Rangers needed to win Game 5. But after falling behind in the 6th inning, they needed a spark to keep their season alive. And sure enough, Adolis Garcia delivered, hitting a 3-run home run that put the Rangers up 4-2. So as you can imagine, he was pretty excited, spiking his bat and taking a long trot around the bases. However, just 2 innings later, he was drilled by a fastball on the very first pitch, sparking an immediate confrontation between the 2 teams. Now, whether or not that pitch was intentional is up for debate, but in the end, both the pitcher and Garcia were ejected. And despite his home run, the Astros went on to win the game in the 9th inning. So at this point, the Rangers needed to win back-to-back games in Houston, and for Garcia, the final 2 games were all about getting revenge. He was met with an overwhelming amount of boos every time he came to the plate, and he ended up striking out 4 times in a row to start the game. However, in the 9th inning, Garcia finally connected, hitting a grand slam that pretty much sealed the win for the Rangers. In Game 7, Garcia almost single-handedly won the game with 4 hits and 2 home runs. So over the course of 7 games, he set a record for the most RBIs in a single postseason series with 15. But with the World Series right around the corner, he still wasn't done quite yet. In Game 1, the Rangers and Diamondbacks were tied at 5 after going back and forth the entire game. But in the bottom of the 11th, Adolis Garcia came to the plate, and once again, he delivered, hitting a game-winning home run to the opposite field. Now, unfortunately, this would essentially mark the end of his postseason, as he would suffer an injury to his oblique in Game 3. But there's no doubt that it was one of the most dominant postseason performances of all time. However, his rise to fame also resulted in speculation among fans that maybe his sudden transformation wasn't entirely natural. Following the 7-game series against Houston, several tweets started gaining traction accusing Garcia of using steroids. One of the main arguments for this claim was the massive change in his appearance compared to when he first made his debut. And to this day, many people are still convinced that he's cheating, despite there being no actual proof. Players are tested on a regular basis, so to say that he's somehow getting around those tests is a bit of a stretch. And for now, I think we just need to focus on what he's been able to accomplish in only a few short years. Despite only having played 3 full seasons in MLB, Adolis Garcia is far from inexperienced. He's spent his whole life trying to be where he is now, and it's finally paying off. So despite the fact that he's already 31 years old, it seems like he still has plenty of time left in the spotlight. And for now, it's safe to say that Adolis Garcia is one of the best stories in baseball.